بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول النبي الكريم. Alhamdulillah, we're resuming our fiqh classes and we're talking about today we're starting a new chapter, which is Kitab al-Sawm, which is the chapter of fasting. So since today we're doing it at an odd time, inshallah we will not keep it so long. Inshallah, it'll be relatively normal, inshallah. And but today, of course, is a very important class regarding fasting, and we'll start off this discussion with the definition and we'll move forward from there, inshallah. So he says, as-sawmu darban, wajib wa nafil. He says that there are two types of fasts. One is the obligatory fasts, and then you have the nafil fasts, right? And he'll explain both. So just as an introduction to this chapter, right? Fasting just literally means just refraining, right? Fasting itself, just or sawm itself, just means imsak, which is just to refrain or to hold back from something, right? So whether it can be from refraining from speech, for example, it can be refraining from food and everything else, or it could be related to anything, right? But fasting or sawm in the Shari'i context means to refrain from, the food, drinks, and also relations with your spouse, right? And of course, while maintaining the proper intention for that as well. So that's the definition of fasting. Okay. Now, there's one point here, I'll mention it. And this is a kind of important point, so that's why he says it here. He says that Sawm has 6 different types. There are 6 types of Sawm. So he says, قِسْمٌ مِنْهَا لَا يَجُوزُ إِلَّا بِنِيَّةٍ مِنَ اللَّيْلِ. It says, one type, it is not permissible to make this fast except with intention from the night. So you must make intention before the day starts, right? And there are four of those, right? Or 3 rather. One is qada of Ramadan. So when you're making qada of Ramadan, you must make that intention before the day starts. And of course, the qada of Ramadan could be for different reasons, as we'll discuss inshallah in the future. But so qada of Ramadan, you must make intention from night. The second is nadhrun mutlaq, any general promise that you make. Sometimes you make a promise that, oh Allah, if you give me this job, if you give me this, I will fast, right? You don't mention that I will fast on this day or I will fast on that day, but you just mentioned generally that I will fast. In that case, you have to make the intention from the night. And the third is kafara, any type of expiation that you're giving, and we'll talk about that as well, inshallah. Any type of expiation that you give, and the result is you must fast. In that case, you must make the intention from nighttime. Okay. وَثَلَاثَةٌ مِنْهَا يَجُوزُ مِنَ النَّهَارِ. He says there are 3 fasts that you can actually make the intention during the day, right? And we'll talk about how the day is divided. But essentially, even after the morning starts, essentially until mid-morning, you have until about mid-morning to decide if you want to fast or not. Okay. And there are 3 fasts. He says one is the fasting of Ramadan, not the qada of Ramadan, the fasting of Ramadan itself. You have until mid-morning to make your decision that, do I want to fast this day? I mean, this is assuming that you have an option, right? This is assuming, for example, you're traveling, for example, and you have an option to choose between fasting or not fasting, and you haven't made up your mind. And so let's say, it's past Fajr, and you're like, you know what, I'll decide after Fajr if I'm going to fast or not. So you can do that for the fast of Ramadan. But for the qada of Ramadan, you cannot do during the day, you must do it from night. Second is a specific nadhrun muayyan, meaning like a specific oath that you make, that, oh Allah, if you give me this job, I will fast this day, for example. I'll fast this day or that day, whatever else it is, So then you must fast on that specific day. And the third is nafil. A nafil fast, you can make the intention, until mid-morning. And I'll explain what mid-morning means. But essentially, you have until mid-morning to determine if you are going to fast that day or not, right? So, let's say you wake up in the morning and, somehow you woke up earlier than Fajr, especially nowadays, right? Now that Fajr is so late. Let's say you wake up prior to Fajr time beginning and you're like, you know what? Today seems like a really good day, you know, and let me go grab some food. Or maybe you just start eating. Maybe you just go and eat and you're like, I'm really hungry, so let me go eat. So let's say you get up at 5 a.m. and you go have a nice meal, right? Now Fajr comes in, and after Fajr, you're like, wait, I already had a nice meal before Fajr. So why not just fast for the remainder of the day? I have a busy day, for example, I don't have time to eat anyways. I might as well make the intention for fasting. So you can make the intention even after Fajr time begins and until mid-morning, which I'll talk about, inshallah. Okay? So you guys understood that so far? Any questions on that? Okay. فالواجب ضربان. He says that the necessary fast, the fard fasts are of two types. So منهم ما يتعلق بزمان بعينه. He says there are those fasts that are specified with a specific time. For example, like the Psalm of Ramadan, وَالنَّذْرُ مُعَيَّن. And also, for example, a specific oath or a vow that you make. That if something happens, I'll fast on this specific day. فَيَجُوزُ صَوْمُهُ بِنِيَّةٍ مِنَ اللَّيْلِ. So he is explaining further, saying that it is permissible to make the intention from the night. Right? And obviously, as I said as well, that you can make the intention even after the night and the day has begun. Okay. So basically, now let me just explain this basically, right? What is considered midday? So I said that you can make intention of the main two that apply to us is the fast of Ramadan, right? Fast of Ramadan and Nafil. Right? So for those, you can make intention up until midday. So what is midday? Midday is you take the beginning time of Fajr. So let's say Fajr starts, for example, 6 o'clock, right? Fajr starts at 6 o'clock, for example, and Maghrib starts at 5 o'clock, for example. Right? So you have 11 hours, right? 11 hours, you take that time and you cut into half. So then that's what, 5.5 hours, right? 5.5 hours, 5.5 hours. That's so essentially from 6 o'clock Fajr, you add 5.5 hours. So up until what? 11:30, right? Basically. So 11. So you have until 11:30 to decide if you want to fast Nafil or if you want to fast for the day of Ramadan. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So again, just clarifying again that if someone is making intention for Nafil fast or for the fast of Ramadan, you have up until midday. So midday is calculated by taking the beginning time of Fajr and the beginning time of Maghrib and cutting it in half. And then essentially that entire first half of the day, you have to make the intention. So it's a lot of time, a good amount of time, you know. Another example. Let's say you had a late night, for example, or you're working or some reason, you had a late night. You get to sleep pretty late. Um, let's say you miss Fajr also. Allah forgive you, right? Let's say you miss Fajr as well, right? And you sleep through and you wake up at like 10 a.m. and you're like, oh my God, half the day is gone, right? So you're like, I didn't eat for this many hours anyways. I might as well just make the intention and fast and I'll get some reward and I'll make some expiation for the salah that I missed. I'm just giving random different examples, trying to like relate, right? Um, but or for example, you prayed Fajr. Let's make a halal example, right? You prayed Fajr and then you went to sleep, right? The entire night you didn't sleep, for example, right? You prayed Fajr and then you went to sleep and you're like, okay, I'm gonna wake up at 9 a.m. for example, or I'm gonna sleep for 3 hours only. You wake up and it's like 11 a.m. and you're like, oh my God, 5 hours went by. So you're like, okay, half the day is already gone. I might as well just make the intention to fast and get the reward for the day of fasting. And since I didn't eat anything anyways, I get the reward of fasting. Does that make sense? So some cheats basically to get some extra reward, inshallah. Okay, and فإن لم ينوي حتى أصبح أجزأته النية ما بينه وبين الزوال. Right. So one opinion, according to some opinions, they say that you have until zawal, which is essentially like 12 o'clock now, right? Nowadays it's around like until the time of dhuhr, basically they say, right? But the more correct opinion is what I mentioned. The more correct opinion is you divide the day into half, and the first half you have until that time. So essentially, if you were to consider zawal, you'd have a little more time maybe nowadays. But let's say Fajr started at 5 and Maghrib was at 7, for example. In that case, maybe you'd have more time in the way that I mentioned. So that's the first type of fast. Okay. والضرب الثاني ما يثبت في الذمة. Okay. The second type is that which is in the responsibility of a person. For example, كقضاء رمضان. For example, the fasts of Ramadan. The qada of Ramadan, sorry, the qada of Ramadan. The making up the fast of Ramadan. So now, in those cases, as I said, you must make the intention from night. وَالنَّذْرُ الْمُطْلَقِ, and also a general mutlaq promise to fast. وَالْكَفَّارَات, as I mentioned as well, all those kaffarat, these are all, oh, subhanAllah, finally this camera finally look like blurry the entire time. Anyways, so nadhr al-mutlaq and kaffarat, right? These that I mentioned before, these three, you must make intention from the night, right? Any questions on what I mentioned so far?
Say from night. What do you mean before you go to?
Meaning before Fajr.
Oh.
Before Fajr. So when I mean night, I mean the time before Fajr. And when I say day or midday, I mean what I explained. Okay. So when you're making up Ramadan fasts, you must make the intention from the night, meaning from before Fajr time starts. Okay. Okay. All right. وينبغي للناس أن يلتمسوا الهلال في اليوم التاسع والعشرون من شعبان فإن رآه صاموا. He says that it's necessary for people to search for the hilal, the moon, the new moon, on the 29th of Sha'ban. So it's coming up, right? Something like 2 months. He says if they see it, if you see the moon, then you must fast the next day. Okay. And this is, again, this goes back on the condition of sighting the moon and so on and so forth. And we're going to talk about it a bit. But and we're going to get into the technicalities of it. But essentially, and as we always say, that ideally you should follow your local community. Ideally, you will follow your local community. We're going to go into the logistics and or the more technicalities of it. But the bottom line is you should follow your local community and don't make it a mocking thing. Don't make it a joke, right? Unfortunately, nowadays it's become a joke, right? That oh, you know what, moon wars and so on and so forth. They start calling it, right? And yeah, unfortunately, it does become like a war of some sort. Like people start fighting with one another. People are like, rude to one another, cursing one another, and so on and so forth. Understand, this is a difference of opinion, right? And this is a valid difference of opinion, depending on which day you start, right? But people become very emotional, and they're like, you know what? Why are you, disuniting the ummah and so on? That's all like emotional arguments, to be honest, right? The fact is that we starting Ramadan or ending Ramadan on the same day does not make us united or disunited. What makes us united or disunited is our hearts and what we do, right? So if a person is claiming that they, for the sake of unity, they're doing it all on the same day, but in their hearts, they're corrupted and they hate one another and so on, what's the point of doing Ramadan together? If you're still cursing one another in Ramadan, you're still rude to one another, you're still mean to one another in Ramadan and outside Ramadan, what unity, right? So again, we're going to get into the technicalities quickly right now, that if on the 29th, right, night of Sha'ban, meaning after the 29th day of Sha'ban, after that night, you will search for the moon for the month of Ramadan. Okay? So if you see it, you must start fasting. وَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْهِمْ أَكْمَلُوا عِدَّةَ شَعْبَانَ 30 يوما 30 يوما ثم صاموا, right? If the moon is hidden, right, or if the moon is not visible, in that case, they will complete 30 days of Sha'ban and then they will fast the month of Ramadan. Very simple and straightforward. There's a lot to say regarding this, right? The Prophet ﷺ, and there's like 2 ahadith on this topic that I like really, really, really love, right? The first hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, نحن أمة أميون. He says, we are an unlettered people. Right? And every time I say it, I get goosebumps. Right? We are an unlettered people, meaning the Prophet ﷺ himself was unlettered. He was not able to read or write. Nowadays, the standard, if someone can't read or write, you look down on them, right? But imagine at that time, the Prophet himself was unable to read or write. So why did he say this? That we are an unlettered people, meaning he's not saying that education is not important. What he's saying is that this religion is so simple that even an unlettered person can understand it. So then he says, the hadith continues, he says, we are an unlettered people, and so therefore calculate the months to be like this. And he showed with his hands. He didn't say the months. He didn't say 29, 30. He said the months are either, he said this, meaning 30, so 10, 10, 10, 30, or 29. Right? So meaning this is how the Prophet explained it. Right? And this, he was such an amazing person that he was not only, and this hadith itself, I don't only use this hadith for Ramadan, but I use it to show how simple the Prophet was, but how intelligent he was. Right? That he made this deen accessible to every single person. And as I say all the time, that our religion is so simple that even the most simplest of people, they can understand it. But at the same time, it's complex enough that you can spend your entire life studying the religion, but still not master the entire religion. Understand? So, and this is the beauty of our deen, alhamdulillah. So understand it. As I said, so that's one hadith. The other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Sumu liru'yatihi wa aftiru liru'yatihi." Right? You fast based on the sighting of the moon, and you break your fast based on the sighting of the next moon. Right? So that's fine. So okay, now you have. Should I finish this? Let me finish this first quickly, and then I'll explain the three groups that we have in the world right now. وَمَنْ رَآ هِلَالَ رَمَضَانَ وَحْدَهُ صَامَ وَإِنْ لَمْ يَقْبَلِ الْإِمَامُ شَهَادَةً. Right? If whoever sees the hilal of Ramadan alone, let's say he himself sees the moon of Ramadan, right? Sama, he must fast because he saw the moon, right? Let's say he saw the moon, right? Even if he just saw like a mistake, right? Even if he thinks he saw the moon, but like his actual belief is I saw the moon. But the people, they don't accept his shahada because there are rules for testimonials. For someone to testify that I sighted the moon, there must be a few conditions. And one person alone does not satisfy the requirement. Understand? So there are a few requirements. Let's assume that he sighted the moon, but others did not. So based on his own sighting, it would be applicable to him and he must fast. But others are not obligated to fast because the shahada was not accepted. وإذا كان في السماء علة قبل الإمام شهادة الواحد العادل في رؤية الهلال. He says if there's some covering in the sky, he says, in that case, the Imam will accept the shahada of one righteous individual to sight the moon. Right? One righteous individual, meaning, let's say, for example, there's clouds everywhere, right? Now, one person comes and says, one righteous, right, trustworthy person, he says, I sighted the moon. In that case, the Imam will accept. When I say the Imam means like the government. رجلا كان وامرأة حرا كان وعبدا, whether man or woman, free person or slave, doesn't matter. If one trustworthy individual sights the moon when there's covering, when there's like clouds, then we will accept even one trustworthy person's view. Right. فإن لم يكن في السماء علة لم يقبل الشهادة حتى يراه جمع كثير يقع العلم بخبرهم. He says if there's no covering in the sky, there's no clouds or anything like that, clear skies. In that case, the Imam will not accept one person's testimonial. Rather, it must be that a few people, a bunch of people, they sight the moon. Why? Why is that? Because when it's cloudy, it's very difficult to sight the moon. So even if one person sees it, we'll accept it. Right? But when there's no clouds, everyone should be able to sight the moon. You know what I mean? And so therefore, it's a requirement that a bunch of people, they sight the moon. Okay? Now, let's talk about moon wars. Right? And like we'll kind of like stop here basically. Right? Essentially, there are three, what's the current climate, what's happening nowadays, right? There are three, right? There are three groups of people when it comes to moon sighting nowadays, right? You have the people who claim local moon sighting, you have the people who claim global moon sighting, and you have the people who claim calculations. These are the three categories of people, right? I'll tell you about them without biases. I'll tell you about them, right? And then I'll tell you what my thoughts are. The first is the people who claim local moon sighting. So in the past, obviously, local meant local, right? Local meant right here, like in this community, right? And obviously, you didn't have, for example, in the past, I'm talking hundreds of years ago, you didn't have phone lines and you didn't have other ways of communication. So it is possible, and it was possible, that Medina and Mecca could have different days of Eid. Understand? Because what? Medina and Mecca, it's a 5 hour, 4 or 5 hour drive, right? Or longer. Right? And so if you're talking about camelback and horseback, you're talking about days, right? So therefore, it's not possible to send that communication. Oh, we sighted the moon, we did not sight the moon, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because I'll explain, right? So local in the past was local itself in that small area. Nowadays, the entire world is. So this is the. So I'm still giving like an overview. I'm not like talking about the three opinions yet, right? This is an overview. So in the past, this was how it was done everywhere. Everywhere, every community would do their own thing. So from Makkah to Medina, they would not like wait for like a pigeon or some animal to come and convey the news. It was just Medina would do its own thing, Makkah would do its own thing. Every single area would do their own thing. Understand? Everybody follows along? Okay. Right. Nowadays, the world is a global village, meaning you have communication readily accessible. So now you have three groups of people. Right? The first group of people, they say that, listen, we are claiming to do local moon sighting. Now, local moon sighting, if we just do it in each locality, it would be very difficult. Although, yes, that is the traditional view, but it would be very difficult if you only selected one area. So if Chantilly was one area and Sterling was another area and Virginia was like 100 different areas, it'd be very difficult. And then Virginia would be different, Maryland would be different, Jersey is different, New York is different. Every single area would be so different. And so that would create a lot of confusion. So what these people they did is, well, these scholars who claimed local moon sighting, what they did is they divided into three sections. They divided the Earth essentially into three areas, right? And what they did is they took the entire North and South America to be one area. Now, is that really local moon sighting? Not really. It's not really like, you're not talking about like local Chantilly and Loudoun County. You're talking like continents, right? North America and South America, two continents. So they put all of that in one area. That's one section of the Earth. They put the second section to be like the middle section, and then the third section they put it to be the eastern section. Now that doesn't apply to us, but I remember the exact details of which countries are included, which countries are not. But essentially, the center of the Earth, they put those in those countries and those continents in one area, and then the eastern area they put that as separate area, right? So essentially, their view is, if, and this is the claim of American scholars, right, that if, and this American, like for example, CHC, like this Central Hilal Committee, what we generally follow, meaning Zia, right? Zia follows and so on, right? Is that if the moon is sighted reliably anywhere in North America or South America, we will accept it and we will call it to be Ramadan and the next month. Okay, so this is very important, right? Number one, right? So if reliably it's sighted in North or South America, anywhere reliably, we'll accept it based on the conditions. I only mentioned a couple of them. There are obviously more, and based on that, we will accept it. Right? That's one view, local moon sighting. Right? Then you have another group of people who say global moon sighting. So technically, the first group, which is local moon sighting, it's technically a form of global, anyways. It's a form of global, right? Because you're taking content, so it's no longer local. It's more of like a version of global, right? But then the global moon sighting is what? Is that anywhere in the world, and they have like one or two conditions. They say their condition is that so long as the time difference is not so much that it would like alter the days. I think it was like 1 or 2 days difference, meaning like if you were to break, if you were to fast, or if the moon was sighted, for example, in the eastern part of the world, right? By the time you come to the western side, it would be like 1 to 2 days different, right? Meaning like you'd miss out on 1 to 2 days basically of fasts. So I think there was like some condition like that, that, you know what, yes, globally, but there was like one or two conditions for that. So I don't remember the exact details, but that was the global view as well, right? But generally what happens is the global view is what Saudi says, right? So generally that's what happens, right? That Saudi announces that, you know what, we've sighted the moon, and so everybody says, okay, you know what, Saudi has announced it, and so we will announce it in different parts of the world as well. So, you know, for example, many places in America, for example, they also do that as well, right? This is also not a bad view. Okay, let me reserve my thoughts. Right. The third view is the calculation. Right? Now, calculations is what they do is they use whatever technology we have, and they calculate that the moon is supposed to be sighted on this day, on this time here. Right? Whether the moon is actually sighted or not, they don't care. Their point is that the moon is supposed to be there. So just as we calculate prayer times, we're going to calculate the timings of the month as well, right? So these are a short, brief overview. And yes, of course, there's a lot more detail to it, but I want to give a brief overview of these three views, right? Now, there are some problems with each of these views, right? Each one of these views has a problem, right? The local moon sighting is not really local, right? Let's be honest, right? So then that's their problem, right? Global moon sighting, the problem is what? What unfortunately has been proven, multiple times that Saudi has not been um like even according to the calculations, it's not supposed to be sighted. Like the moon was technically physically impossible to be sighted, right? And yet they claimed that they sighted the moon, right? So Allah, so that's their problem. The calculations problem is what? Is that, listen, the Prophet ﷺ explicitly said, Sumu li ru'yati, you fast based on the sighting of the moon. So global and local, the first two opinions, generally most traditional scholars, they fall within these two. Most traditional scholars, they say either you follow local or you follow global, right? There's a new opinion, which is this calculation method. This is more for convenience. They've adopted this for convenience, that, you know what, people need to take time off from work, kids need time off from school, and so on and so forth. So therefore, we're going to calculate the sighting of the moon, and we'll go based on that. That seems to be a new view. And the first two opinions, if you were to select one of the first two opinions, technically both are fine, right? So, for example, if Saudi sights the moon, inshallah, okay. Although yes, technically maybe it was impossible to sight the moon, but because they said it, because they're Muslims, inshallah, we'll just accept it. You know, we'll say that they're telling the truth, inshallah. So technically, that's a valid view, right? The global moon sighting, and also the local moon sighting is also technically a valid view as well. Right? So both of these views are technically fine. The calculations method, it's kind of, you're doing it for convenience. You're calculating, and you're kind of going against what the Prophet ﷺ said of sighting the moon yourself, right? Now, what their claim is that they say, listen, yes, the Prophet ﷺ said to sight the moon, but at the same time, now we have all of these technologies that allow us to sight the moon without actually needing to sight it with our own eyes. So we don't really need to see the moon ourselves, because we use calculations for everything. So we'll use it for this as well, right? And there's more detail to all of these, but essentially that's a small overview of the topic. Okay. So as I said, first two opinions, if you take one, inshallah, that's fine. The calculations option, you should generally not take it, right? As for what you should do, generally, my recommendation, what I said was, follow your local masjid, inshallah. Follow not only your local masjid, but follow your reliable scholar. Okay, not necessarily. So now you may say, okay, local masjid, technically what? If I drive 20 minutes, that's still technically local for me too, right? Like I can drive 20 minutes. That's not a big deal, right? So what's local, right? So more so, I would say your trustworthy local masjid. So whatever masjid is in your area, and you know this is a trustworthy masjid, this is a trustworthy imam, this is a trustworthy scholar, I will listen to that person. That's my recommendation. That bottom line, you should do that. You should listen to a trustworthy, reliable scholar / organization, and then do not argue, do not fight. As I said, this is a difference of opinion among scholars. Even the calculation option, although yes, we generally don't agree with it, and most scholars don't really agree with it, but there are some scholars who do say that it's a valid opinion. So don't fight, don't argue, don't create problems, don't create fitna. Fitna is the worst thing that we can do. Right? Causing problems, that's the biggest and worst thing that we can do. Therefore, don't do that. Don't cause fitna, but rather be respectful and be accommodating of other people's views and listen to what other people have to say as well. Even if you disagree with them, even if you disagree, still respect their view and do whatever they're saying as well. Meaning, for example, I'll tell you, right, there was one masjid in Connecticut. The guy reached out to me. He said there's 2 or 3 families that we follow local moon sighting, right? And our local masjid, they follow Saudi, which is global, right? So for the past couple of years, we've been these 2, 3 families. So meaning like 10 people, right? Basically, we had our own little musalla, and we were doing our own separate thing. I told him that. So then he called me, said our lease is running out, and what should we do? Should we continue the lease and pay for it, and then hire another imam? And 2, 3 families, like what can you afford, right? So I told them no, like don't do that. Stay with the community. Whatever the community is doing, you stick with that. Global is a valid opinion. Global is a valid opinion. Now, is Saudi reliable or not? I mean, that's a different story, right? But because they're Muslims and they've claimed it, inshallah, why not? Right? So we assume it to be true, right? And I know people, both sides of the extreme, they'll bash me for this because I'm being, like kind of moderate, right? But like one side of the extreme, they'll say, oh no, you're not being as harsh on the Saudis, right? And then the other side will say, no, you're not considering the convenience of the people. Listen, I'm trying, right? And this balance that I'm trying to, push for is that you remain with your local trustworthy masjid and you do whatever they tell you to do. Okay? Don't cause fights. Don't argue with people. Even if your family members in different states are doing Eid on different days, why does it matter? Right, let them do it. Who cares? Like, I mean, again, they're both following a valid opinion. Let's say if they're praying their salah, with their hands here, or they're praying with their hands here. So what? They're still following valid opinions. So if they're fasting on one day and you're not fasting on that day, leave it. Don't make it like a point of kufr. Like, if you're not fasting, you're kafir. Oh my God, this guy is not fasting. Oh my God, we're celebrating Eid and they're not fasting. Or we're fasting and these guys are celebrating Eid and so on. Leave it. It's a difference of opinion. As I said, so long as it's a valid difference of opinion, leave it. As I said, the calculations method may not be a valid difference of opinion, but it is some minority opinion, right? So like, you shouldn't do takfir, obviously. Don't call someone kafir because of it, but it's not like the best opinion, right? So as I said, the first 2 are reliable opinions. The first 2, local moon sighting and global moon sighting, are reliable opinions. So take either or, right? And I know if there were like more people here, there would be a lot more arguments. But alhamdulillah, it's good that we have fewer people and less arguments, alhamdulillah. And people who try to argue with me about these things, I don't have time for arguments, right? Like, listen, if you don't accept what I'm saying, go somewhere else. I mean, I don't like, what am I going to tell you? I'm trying to be balanced. I'm trying not to incite violence. I'm trying not to push people towards arguments. There are many other people that will like be very unknowingly strict. And I spoke about, I don't know, so those of you who were here a couple months ago, I attended one of the conferences of the local moon sighting, right? And it was very, very evil what I saw. It was sad. It was very sad what I saw, right? And I spoke about it with you all in my community, but the fact is that both are reliable. Global moon sighting is reliable, and local moon sighting is reliable. Some people, their hatred of Saudi, they say no, they're always lying. And okay, listen, at the end of the day, they're Muslims, right? If they've said that this is what's happening, this was happening. Do we agree with them on everything? No, we don't agree with them on everything. But at the end of the day, I mean, we are only responsible for what they're presenting themselves as. They're presenting themselves as Muslims and they're presenting themselves as reliable. Inshallah, So what do we and Zia follow? We generally follow local moon sighting, meaning this North America, South America concept. So if the moon is sighted anywhere in the North America or South America, generally we accept it and we we start the next month. And that's why sometimes we have to wait until California, for example. The moon is a bit older at that time, a bit more aged. And so sometimes the moon becomes more visible at that time. So that's why sometimes we wait. And the people, they hate us for that, right? Well, why don't you just follow what other XYZ organization is doing? They already announced like 50 years ago, that today is going to be Ramadan or whatever. They already prayed Tarawih, they finished Tarawih, and you guys are not even, listen, sorry, we are mean like, this is our definition. This is how we defined it, right? If you don't agree with it, what are you going to do? Like, we're trying our best, just as they're trying their best, right? We disagree with them on certain things, but does that make them kuffar? No, it doesn't. They're all Muslims, we're all Muslims. They have a different opinion, we have a different opinion. Don't start fights. That's my bottom line. I say this every single year. Even last year, I had this discussion a couple of times, not once, multiple. I talked about this. Yet, at the end of the day, people will still come to me later and say, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? What, this, that? Listen, and that's my bottom line. Okay, so I've explained it in some detail. Hopefully, you all understood it. Hopefully, inshallah, I think from now on, I'm just going to send people this video and say, go watch this video and don't talk to me. Don't argue with me afterwards, because the fact is, like, alhamdulillah, obviously I've studied, some bunch of years, alhamdulillah. The scholars who have studied, they've spent years and decades of their lives. Many of them are spending a lot of time. Most of these people are not getting paid for it, especially for moon sighting and so on. And most of them are doing volunteer, right? So, like, respect them for their dedication and their time and so on. So, just the bottom line, avoid fights. That's the bottom line. Any questions?
We had that a few years ago where about 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one night that we sent people
back
home.
here because
Yeah,
you couldn't stay at school.
Exactly.
And when you were last year, you don't have no prayers for Eid yet. You
Yeah.
have to go other side, all the way to other side, the high school, middle school.
Yeah.
Start writing.
Yeah.
So at least we should have a both parties. Imam here, masjid open for our side too. We can come.
Why not? Why not? We should be accommodating, but like there are other organizations as well. So like that's why we don't really do both. But as I said, both are valid opinions. So like if you do select one or the other, it's okay. But I understand your point that yes, maybe we should accommodate both. Yeah, you're right, 100%. I don't disagree with you. I agree with you rather. I agree that we should accommodate both opinions because but then as I said, like one extreme is going to say, hey, you guys, look, you guys are not strict enough. You guys have to be more strict. The other side will say, hey, you guys are not lenient enough because they're too lenient. Or whatever it is. So we'll just.
Unfortunately, that's a problem all around the world. Everybody take their side. So they agree, you go your way, let us, be our way.
Yeah.
Pretty much both of them the same.
Yeah.
We celebrate one day before.
Yeah.
Like my sister celebrates one day, 2 days or one day later than that.
In Afghanistan?
No, in Pakistan.
Oh,
She's been in Pakistan for 30 years.
Yeah.
So I eat Mubarak one day before she eats Mubarak after one day. There's no problem.
It's not a big deal. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. As I said, we try to maintain respect and unity for everybody. That's the bottom line. Sure. Okay. We'll stop here, inshallah. If you have any further questions, you can always text me, but I will not tolerate arguments. I will not respond. I'm telling you, people like around Ramadan, I get a lot of rude and mean things to me. Like people are very mean to me also. But like I just don't respond. I don't have time for it.
I had questions last year too because Adams Center Saudi. So
yeah.
Why aren't you fasting? Because we didn't. Is at the masjid. We didn't see the moon.
Yeah.
We waited for the North American.
North and South America.
Yeah.
We didn't cite it.
We saw it.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, end of discussion. Like they cited it, we didn't. Okay, or they're following Saudi, we're not following Saudi. End of discussion. So that's the bottom line. Okay. Jazakumullah khairah. Thank you all for coming. May Allah Ta'ala bless you and may Allah accept you all. And may Allah accept your coming. Inshallah, next week we will continue from after Isha, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairah. Subhanallah. Alhamdulillah.